Which makes sense. Guests want to see people who look like them. But guests also want to ride rides that are designed by people with the same limitations that they have. And if most people told you they were hypermobile, you'd be like, that's great, you do gymnastics, not like your body dislocates at will.
You're a superhero because you're Plastic Man now.
Yep.
But that's not necessarily the case.
It does have some benefits, honestly.
This is Controlled Chaos. We talk about theme park development from first rendering to rope drop and beyond. Now, accessibility is a buzzword these days that means making sure that everyone can experience an attraction regardless of their physical limitations. And this is something that's not well understood. But you should learn to understand it because even if you don't, your guests surely do. So we talked to someone who not only understands it, he lives it. You're about to meet someone with a special set of skills, someone who is passionate about theme park accessibility. Meet Stacia Maconiates, a creative technologist. We met at the IAAPA trade show and we discussed the challenges of designing attractions for accessibility. I hope you enjoy this interview because I surely did, and I think it got better every minute we talked.
I have a genetic collagen disorder. It's called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and my body doesn't produce collagen correctly, so it affects all of my joints. I'll show. They can't see it, but I can dislocate all of my joints at will. I'm in these straps right now because it holds my joints in place, actually.
Interesting. Okay.
So for me, my biggest issues are my knees are hyperextensive, so I can't stand for long periods of time because my kneecaps will literally shift out of place.
Okay.
So lines are a really fun one for me.
Okay.
And that's where a lot of my work actually started. Was my mom passed in 2021, and after we sorted through her estate and everything, we went, well, we have some extra money, let's go to Disney.
Okay.
And we did the whole Disney Universal thing.
Who's
and my brother, my fiance, and I.
Okay, great.
My brother and I growing up had never been to a theme park. My mom was involved in safety QA, so she was like, no. But my fiance's family's huge Disney fans, the type of family who there's 15 of them and they all have matching t-shirts thing. So we went, and it was really fun. I had to rent an ECV, an electric scooter.
Sure.
And there was some really nice pros and cons, and it really made me realize that the issues that I was facing was not people-wise. Every cast member I interacted with was great, but so much of the lines at both Disney and Universal, particularly queues, no one ever thinks about the turn radius in queues.
Right.
Or if it's a tight turn radius, what is the material that you're scraping up against? And then, especially with some of the newer rides where we're hitting interactive queue elements, if you're in an ECV or wheelchair, you can't properly see them. There's a lot of times I would be waiting in the line and have to kneel on the machine to see what I was supposed to be seeing as a guest.
Right, so sightlines are a big issue, and there's probably a little bit of a tension there because you want there to be a proper envelope so that people can't touch it.
Yep.
Right, but then they need to be able to see it.
Yeah, especially because the thing I noticed it was mainly the more thrilling rides, anything where it was 40 inches or over. So, they're thinking our youngest person is probably, let's say, 8 to 10.
Okay.
And they're a minimum of 40 inches. So they're working at that sight line. But if you're in a chair or any sort of mobility device,
Right.
you are not at that 40-inch sight line.
Yeah, and I have a feeling that people aren't thinking about this at
No.
all. I mean, queuing,
it's such a minor thing that you wouldn't usually think about it.
Right, and just to give you a little history, there was, when I worked at Disneyland in the 90s, all the queues were 30 or 36 inch wide. What we were running into operationally, because I was a cast member at that point on Jungle Cruise, as we talked about, was the fact that a lot of people rent wheelchairs or whatever they're called, and they didn't need them, and they were doing that as a line skipping technique. So now all of a sudden, you would have 27 wheelchairs in line, all wanting to skip the line with their parties, and so they said, all right, well, we can't do this anymore. So what we'll do is at Jungle Cruise, for example, we redesigned the entire boathouse, put the new boathouse in when Indiana Jones came in. So the original one was torn down, the new one came in, but it was 48 inches wide, to ADA code so that you could go through and no one could skip the line. And so then it became, people were upset because, well, I expect to be able to skip the line. No, you're not skipping the line. The line was because we couldn't get you through in the first place. I
hate that. I hate that concept of people using disability because I know it's become a pretty big issue recently, and theme parks have tried in different ways to sort of combat it. But it's so frustrating because for me, they can't see me, but you can see me. I look pretty normal until I put my foot over my head or something.
Sure.
But it sucks because it feels weird to use services sometimes when I'm I look fine.
Yeah, and it's probably some miscommunication too, or some misunderstandings that happen.
Yeah.
From time to
Oh,
time.
yeah. Yeah. A lot of times people think these are fashion devices and not mobility aids
Right.
because, it looks, unless you're
looks
feeling the
cool.
material,
Yeah.
it's cloth. It's
Yeah.
elastic that's holding my knees.
Sure.
It's the X's are on all of the joint points, so that
Right.
way you hit the elastic like tension right where you guys would stop, because without this,
Yeah, it just goes.
I go about 10 degrees negative.
Okay, that makes sense.
But, it's not something you'd think of. And if most people told you they were hypermobile, you'd be like, that's great, you do gymnastics, not like
Right.
your body dislocates
Right,
at
you're
will.
a superhero because you're Plastic Man now.
Yep,
but that's not necessarily the case.
It does have some benefits, honestly, but like it also has
you
some...
got to tell me what those are.
Oh, okay, so I'm great at wiring things because I can get into all the tiny corners.
Oh, interesting.
Or like, my fingers bend back super, super far, which is really, really helpful with trying to like get out of handcuffs.
Oh, okay.
I can slip handcuffs off of
All
me
right,
without...
don't arrest this guy, people.
But yeah, no, it's got some day-to-day benefits. But like the other thing that people don't think about is collagen's in every system. So like I have pretty severe cardiovascular problems. 3 of my heart valves regurgitate. So
okay.
one of my fun things is for my 25th birthday, we went to Disneyland and we went on Incredicoaster 3 times in one day. And I gave myself what's called cervical lordosis, which is you have this part of your spine where it connects to your neck. It's called your C-spine.
He's putting behind his neck.
I straightened it out
Yeah.
by inverting myself 3 times, because usually
Oh, wow.
most people would have their tendons that like hold their neck muscles in place, and
Oh,
my
wow.
tendons don't do that.
Oh. Yeah,
So,
and
like-
those coasters go up to 3Gs sometimes.
Yep.
I'm not sure what an Incredicoaster is, but
Yeah,
I
no,
mean,
it's crazy because it looks pretty normal until you like put me on a coaster and whoops.
right.
And it definitely sucks for like my younger brother who's not affected but loves thrill rides
but has to.
and has to deal with me. So
Right.
when we went to Universal, he wanted to go on Velocicoaster. And he did, and he had a great time, and it took like an hour and a half of me just sitting there doing nothing, waiting for him to get off the Velocicoaster.
Right.
Because that was not one I was going to go on.
Yeah. Okay. So that's your journey. So you have some struggles, but on the outside, look fairly fairly what's the word? Able-bodied.
Yeah,
normal?
generally I look pretty normal, and I like
Yeah.
to think in a day-to-day basis I function pretty well. Work-wise, I've actually tried to utilize a lot of my disability stuff, because like, my fingers bend super far backwards, but it's great to mimic someone with poor fine motor skills.
Oh, okay.
Because like, effectively the only reason I can keep my fingers straight is because I'm engaging the muscles in them. But if I let go, I'm effectively the same as someone with like severe nerve damage, which is
Sure.
great for prototyping.
Oh, interesting.
It
Okay.
makes it so like at any stage I can just test the accessibility of something by simply like letting my hands fall.
Huh. Okay. All right. So this is what you grew up with. This is the hand that you were dealt that you seem to be coping extremely well with.
You gotta find the fun in it.
Yeah. Okay. So tell me about the fun in it. Well,
I mean, I like to joke that I'm extra flexible, but like besides the physical flexibility, I have to think on a day-to-day basis. How long can I stand? What am I going to be doing? How much walking am I doing?
Yeah.
How high is this going to reach my heart rate, sort of thing? Because it's a heart issue, sort of. So,
sure.
but through that, it becomes. It's really helped with like time management, weirdly enough, and being very go with the flow.
Yeah.
It definitely helps with that. And then with the design process, it's been really great because not only can I like prototype, but I look at this stuff so often that it's become sort of a second nature to kind of be like, this is not accessible.
Right.
Just looking at something without even having to touch it.
Right.
And it's fun. I get some really like interesting solutions that I've come up with for workarounds. And one of them's been like a lot of the gyro stuff I've been doing, or I've been working with a paraplegic. Someone who was in a car crash and now doesn't have any feeling really below their shoulders. But before that, they were a jazz drummer. So we've been using motion sensors. I jerry-rigged 2 old Xbox Connects, and I'm creating a visualization system that's tracking his movement from basically 2 points of view, and we're using his head movement, the head and the shoulder shrugs, to be able to trigger sound effects for a drum kit.
Oh, interesting. So he can still do his thing.
Yep.
I mean, we all know the Def Leppard drummer was in a car crash, right? And only had
One arm.
one arm.
This guy's got no arms. He's just got shoulder shrugs and like neck movement,
Right.
and that's what we're working with.
Huh. And you're able to help him.
Yep, and
Wow.
he's still getting used to it. That's the biggest thing, is figuring out a system that works for not just one person, but then scaling it up. So like, anyone could be able to use this system to create music, sort of thing.
Right. So this is music, and then how do you? Let's translate this into the theme park world. What does that look like?
I've been using a lot of this stuff to create smaller interactive performances for theaters in the Phoenix area. So a lot of them have been, we have this event out there called First Friday,
Okay.
Which is an arts and culture thing, and a lot of busking happens. So I've been talking with some people who have been trying to create interaction moments and using gyroscopes to create lighting effects that when a performer like moves in a certain way, it creates a background light. And that's been really great for them being able to do their little pop-up performances and not having to worry about having an extra person to run lighting and sound.
Right.
So that's been really great. Yeah, one of the other things I'd love to expand out to, and I've kind of just been limited by budgetary and physical constraints, is using it to control robotics, because effectively I can take any like gyroscopic motion and use it to control its OSC data. So it's a really simple protocol that is sendable to a variety of different software. So I could use it in microcontrollers like Arduinos or Raspberry Pis to drive motors and servos based off of, let's say you've got your arm all the way to the left and you want that to trigger an effect. And by effect, I mean like, a servo moves and that causes a robot arm to move and mirror you, sort of thing.
Okay. So you can basically, with your limited movement, do something that causes a robot arm to, or an animatronic, or some
Move
sort
fully,
of pathetic, move fully, and then they can be fully functioning.
Yeah.
In a manner of speaking, and there's always some limitations, but then again, there's also some applications where you can lift up a truck, right, where you normally wouldn't be able to do so.
One of the other big things I've been trying to think of is, the spider web game?
Yeah.
So that
at
one,
Disneyland, or at California Adventure, there's this interactive attraction. You sit four across in a ride vehicle, and then as you shoot a spider web out, there's some sort of a
they're using infrared sensors.
And based on where you position your hand, it shoots a web that you see, so it looks like you're actually doing the webs.
So something I noticed with that, because me doing this over and over for 3 minutes is terrible for my wrist.
Yeah, it was terrible for mine too.
I assume it's terrible for a regular person, and for me, I'm like, we're not using this for the next 45 minutes. But something I noticed is if you effectively put another series of sensors in there, you could do kind of what I do, which is track someone's range of motion and adjust it accordingly. So that's like the big thing that I've been realizing is a lot of stuff could be kind of easily retrofitted, and then going forward, we need to figure out how to better build this accessibility in from because it's way easier to build accessible than renovate something accessible, because then that's an extra budget.
Yeah. This is interesting, and so obviously you're a programmer.
Kind of. It's weird. I kind of hit that weird vibe between like computer programmer and designer, and then also a lot of like sound and lighting design.
Interesting. Yeah.
I kind of just generally describe it as creative technology because I end up doing a lot.
Which is a good thing. You got to be a jack of all trades,
Yep.
especially in this business. So.
Oh yeah. So the only thing I really can't do is solder, and that's mostly because you don't want my hands failing when I've got 700 degrees in them.
Sure. Yeah. So tell me about Big Break Foundation.
Oh yeah, they've been great. I actually got connected with them through an ADA coordinator I know through LinkedIn.
Okay.
And I applied through them, and I got talking with Nicole, the leader of it, about some of the work I've been doing. And her whole point is to bring people who are usually kind of on the fringes. You might not, students or people later in career who are looking to transition, or people like me who might have a bit of a harder time because I have a disability. I have a great home setup that works exactly for me, but bringing that into an office would probably be a lot for someone, sort of thing. So it makes it a bit more difficult to hire. And basically the point is to bring us out and get us in front of all these people and get us talking about what we're doing and show that we are just as useful and hireable.
Sure. And how do you, I feel like part of the problem is that what they don't want to do is hire somebody, and then when it doesn't work out, like with me, if it doesn't work out, they'll say, see you, which I'm sure has happened every once in a while. But the problem is then if you hire somebody who has any sort of...
The double-edged diversity sword.
Yeah, exactly, where it's like, well, now you're discriminating against me, and I'm gonna sue you for that. And allege that even, and then they have to fight that in court. So that's something that you got to contend with, because you got to say, well, no, I'm just trying to have the same opportunity. So how do you overcome that sort of the litigious?
If you have the answer for that, I'd love to know.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of been, and I get it on so many levels, because, you know, if it's a risk, in some ways, for a company, it is more of a risk to hire me. I'm more likely to get injured. That probably means that, like, you don't really want me on install to the same, I'm not going to go climb a 40-foot ladder for you,
Sure.
sort of thing. You're going to need
Yeah.
me to have an extra set of hands for that. That's an additional cost. You know, I have a unique way of looking at stuff because of my disability that is helpful, but it also comes with some serious drawbacks. And then, ironically, they hit the thing of, well, we're not going to hire you because you have a disability and would open us up to all this stuff, which
Right.
in
Or
itself
if you fell
is...
or something at work, then all of a sudden it's a personal injury claim and things like that. So, I mean, maybe the answer is just for laws to say, you can't sue, and that way we can hire you. You know,
Yeah,
that kind of thing.
it varies state by state. I know for at least the state I'm in, they have what they call a no-fault work comp case for that sort of thing. But
That makes sense.
yeah, it definitely makes it more difficult to get hired, and that's sort of it's become sort of the do I hit the am I disabled box or not?
Right.
Because otherwise I get to describe, oh, why is all of your work focused on accessibility?
So you want to just come in as you,
Yeah.
and then be able to tell your entire story, and that's probably a good way to do it.
Exactly, and it's way easier because otherwise then I get to go, hi there, you've now hired me, and we have to move all of my accessible stuff into the office, and by the way, I'm disabled, and here's all of the accommodations we need to do, which aren't too bad.
Right.
It's really just, I can't stand for more than 20, 30 minutes. You need to let me use my voice-to-text technology for long typing and documentation.
Uh-huh. Which is fantastic, actually,
Yeah.
that it's come so far, because now, I mean, even 10 years ago...
I can code in C++ and Python with my voice. It's insane.
Really?
Yep. Yeah, no, there's some really cool, and that's one of the... I have such a pro-con relationship about what people call AI, which I would call generative machine learning, but it's so useful for certain tasks like that. It's so predictive that if I start telling it something like abs.time, it can fill in the rest of my Python script without it even needing to know.
Yeah.
And then from
that's
there I can edit. And even if I've like cut down my editing by 80% and I'm now just filling in what would effectively be like the changeable values, then there we go. If I just need to edit the variables, that's like 15% of the code. That's not, and that's saved the majority of my hands, which allows me to work for way longer.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a great time in history then, all that all of this has come to fruition.
Oh yeah, it's amazing how like far we've moved in accessibility, and I'm really excited to see how we bring that into like themed entertainment and immersive experiences.
Right.
Especially as we get more and more interactive. I'm really excited to see what like Universal comes out with, because I know for Epic Universe they've been really talking about some of the changes they've made compared to like previous rides, and I deeply appreciate that because
Well, have they had panels? They probably have. I mean, actually, I take it back. This is your very first IAAPA show, so you're probably not at all.
I've actually talked with two of the Universal creative
you
teams,
have? Okay.
about some of this stuff, both some of their older projects and the pros and cons of retrofitting buildings.
Well, I feel like both Universal Creative and Disney Imagineering, because they're the folks who, they hire more people than anyone, really, are the ones that need to. I mean, there's a lot of small, the Thinkwells of the world. They're going to have a hard time finding that spot, but a big mega corporation like a Disney would have no problem, because, and they're
also the people who I would argue need to do the most, because so many of the Make-A-Wish stuff is I want to go to Disney, or I want to go see Universal, I want to go meet Shrek.
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
And those are the people, and I know that there's great organizations like Give Kids the World that really focuses on providing at least accessible accommodations for people who are going through the Make-A-Wish process.
Sure.
And doing their Make-A-Wish trip, and that's amazing, and I definitely want to shout those guys out.
Yeah.
And I know also Disney's been trying. There's some stuff that I've really appreciated and some stuff I felt kind of missed the mark. Like, those magic bands they have, the RFID-enabled ones. So those are a really good idea, except at the end of the day, if you are not feeling up to doing much more than this, it will not register.
Much more than what?
I would argue this is probably making a 20 to 30% angle wave, as opposed to
with your wrist.
Yeah,
okay.
more of like a 90, like, from the side, like a full hardy wave sort of thing.
Okay.
And I get it. I get why you do that, because, to fit the technology into, you got to make sacrifices. And, there's always improvement. And it's nice to see that they're moving forward with this stuff.
Yeah.
And moving from, like, to go back to the Spider-Man ride, that with still being a pain, is a lot easier than the previous, like, hold and point object and then frantically move, like...
Oh, what's
the Toy Story one.
Yeah, the Toy Story Mania attraction where you're pulling a rope, essentially, yeah.
Yeah, that one is way less accessible.
Yeah, that makes sense. So
it's all iterative steps, and I think it's just kind of at the point where we need to get more people involved in the design creation process who have these disabilities, instead of just bringing it to a test group at the end of it, where you can do some change, but it's 80-90% there.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense, and probably being there at the beginning of the process is important, I would think.
Oh yeah, and that kind of goes back to I can prototype someone with poor fine motor skills. So, that's not even, I don't even need to go and find someone and ask. I can just, like, poke the button and see if it'll work or not.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. This is a pretty important topic, and I think a lot of people need to be thinking about it. So what would be sort of your vision for the future when it comes to accessibility?
I would love to see them really focusing on hiring people with disabilities and getting us involved, not just... I know there's been a push, especially for some of the more customer-facing roles, which makes sense. Guests want to see people who look like them, but guests also want to ride rides that are designed by people with the same limitations that they have.
Sure.
Or
at least those that work elegantly.
Yeah.
Right.
At least similar enough. I don't need to use a wheelchair on a daily basis, at least for now, and I'm very thankful for that. But because of the times I do, when I'm going to a zoo or anything that's going to involve a lot of standing, I'm aware, even when I'm not in a wheelchair, just on my day-to-day life, that's not accessible. Even if it's something small like you've let your hedge overgrow into the walkway. For you and I, that's easy. That's step around the walkway. But if your walkway has a curb cut, then someone in a chair, or not even just a chair, but a stroller, is going to really struggle to get around that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And that's...
Speaking with someone who's had strollers, I mean, especially those double wides, but...
You said you have 3 kids. Imagine, that's wider than a wheelchair.
Yeah.
At least most of them. And trying to get that around, any sort of, walking path where there's anything in the way.
Well, and not only that, some are not wide, some are long.
Yep.
So then you've got a turn radius issue. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the turn radius issue is what I feel like really messes with most queues and attractions.
Sure.
Is no one thinks much beyond... A wheelchair is really helpful because they effectively have a circular turn radius.
Right. It's a 60-inch... I used to design these things for Universal, by the way. So yeah, 60-inch or a 5-foot turnaround, but space is so valuable. And when it comes to this, that you only do 5 feet. That's it. And because anything else is wasted space, you're paying for extra building that you potentially don't need. You're taking away from a show scene on the other side of the wall that could make that scene better. And so, yeah, there's this push and pull, give and take, where everything matters. And how do you do that elegantly to where it works for everything, and every one of the what is the word for the portable wheelchair? It's slipping me.
The scooter type?
Yeah, the scooter.
ECV.
ECV, okay.
Electric conveyance vehicle.
Okay, I'm wanting to say HOV, and I know that's wrong. So that's the.
But yeah,
that's
those are such an interesting one to me, because I get why we have them, and at the same time, they're really not the best design for theme parks.
Right. They're big and they're heavy. They don't turn well, and they run out of battery.
Yep, and they're slow, and they don't handle... There's a specific issue, actually, with Guardians of the Galaxy, where after the pre-show, it goes up a ramp into what's already a choke point for regular people, it narrows slightly.
Uh-huh.
The ECVs stall out. They will slow to a crawl as you're entering that choke point.
And especially if the battery's low.
Yep.
You just may not be able to make it. So if it's at the back of the park, you've been going most of the day, then I can see
I have straight up gotten separated from my group before in line because they did, in the crush of everyone moving, the ECV is slowed down to the point where it's maybe moving at half a mile an hour up this ramp, and they're just getting whisked along. So one of them panicked when they weren't sure where I had went. They couldn't see me because I'm lower, so they're trying to figure out if the chair tipped because if it tipped, I can't get it off me.
Right. Well, that makes sense. Yeah.
So it's and even and that's a newer ride, and I know that they really, really focused in a lot of the little bits on accessibility for that. It has pull-off areas and safety. At the top of that ramp, there's legitimately a pull-off area for you to and that tells me that they're at least aware that that's a choke point, but I don't know if they went through with a half-dead ECV and checked if that would work in a traditional guest flow.
Right, it might have just been 1 to 12, I can't remember the slope exactly, but whatever the ADA compliant
Yep.
slope is, they may have just said, well, this is what we have. But that's the thing, though, that was a brand new building. It wasn't something that they had to put in that was built in 1963, and they're just kind of doing what they can with what they have. Yeah, they absolutely could have made that differently, but maybe they weren't. I mean, and I think also probably just a project architect comes in after the show designer. The show designer says, the pre-show's here, the queue is here, and we need to get from this level to this level in this amount of space. And
Ramp.
so let's just make it an ADA ramp, and that will be that. Yeah.
I think that's sort of the thing where having disabled people in the show designing and the architecture,
Right.
You know, because at some point someone's going to be like, yeah, that'll work ADA wise, but is that going to work with our ECVs that we have? That if anything, if you're in the parks and you're working on them, then you're using it more often.
Sure.
Because I can have my experience as like a guest in the park, but I'm only going like once a year.
Right.
And
you're not good at it in terms of getting around the space, knowing where to go, getting lost, trying to get to the restroom, everything else. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's, especially by the end of the day, I'm conserving my energy. I'm not really trying to like push the boundary and see what can be improved.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's mostly like I want to improve my experience over like maybe someone else's at my own cost.
Sure. Yeah. So it takes a lot to really be the person who's not only, there's 140 something disciplines within this themed entertainment realm, at least when it comes to designing.
And I'm sure it grows every year.
I'm sure it does, yeah. We just added one with you today, I think.
Yep. Probably your first creative technologist.
Yeah, okay. And that's a great term for it, creative technologist. I like that.
Thank you.
But the problem is that if they're looking for, a show lighting guy, well, you have to be able to do that and then say, well, I can bring this to the table also.
Yep.
And I think that may be the way to position it. That's just my
yeah, I've
feeling.
kind of been going with like programming and technology for show design, and then being like, and also I can do this.
Yeah.
And like, or I can also do your interaction design and make sure it's accessible
Which
for
is
people.
a huge plus. All that is a big plus. I think the way I heard it described is that you need one good thing to get you in the door.
Yep.
And then all the other things you can say, look, you really want me because of X, Y. I can do this and this and do this, and also I really want to be here. And that goes. That's how I got my first job. I said, look, I have no experience, but I can do this, I can do this, and I can do this. I made up 3 things that I could fairly do well as a college graduate, and I want to be here. And I think that matters too, and I can tell you do, which is good for the future.
I don't know. I love seeing a problem and figuring out how I can fix it, and then telling the person whose actual problem it is, to go and fix it.
This is where we talked about how we met. Stacia entered a design competition we host at themedattraction.com. It runs during the spring semester, and it allows students to get their portfolio work in front of some great companies, design companies that could potentially hire them.
Yeah, and thank you so much for putting on the themed attraction showcase. That's like, because Arizona State doesn't have any sort of like themed entertainment stuff, so I was sort of bouncing around with these ideas, and I was like, what do I do with this? And then I found your themed attraction showcase.
Oh yeah, well, let's talk about
that.
Let's talk about that.
But yeah, no, that was super, like the feedback was super helpful. And
okay, who was in your panel? Because there were 30 projects.
Trying to remember.
For those of you who don't know, this is basically an online portfolio review where we put you in front of people from Falcons and whoever happens to sign up that year, JRA, all these big entertainment companies, entertainment design companies. We bring creative professionals with years of experience, some absolute theme park legends, on these panels, and they review student work. And that way it gets you exposed, you as a student exposed to that person. They can see your work, they can potentially hire you, or you can at least make a network connection. So it's been really good, I think. But tell me about your panelists and your whole experience with the showcase.
So I was last year, I was 2023, so I don't remember everyone, but I remember I had Bob Weiss, which was really, really helpful because he's a huge theme park guy. And Logan Zawacki.
Yep.
And he's just a great connection to have. He knows everyone.
Yeah.
And it was really helpful because a lot of the feedback for me was I was using an earlier version of my gyro, and a lot of the code was still sort of figuring out exactly how to make it do what I wanted it to do, but had the basics.
Yeah.
And that was really helpful to get their feedback of, you have a great idea, let's figure out how to like refine it. And effectively, do I want to see this as a product, or do I want to see this as a service that I can bring as part of my portfolio? And that was really helpful for me to think of, because I wasn't really thinking like that before.
Sure.
And it made me realize, no, I don't want to sell this. I want to make this in as many hands as possible, which means I want to go and get hired.
Yeah.
Which was great. And a lot of the feedback was that in some ways, like, I can technically document as much as I want, but a marketing person is going to have no idea what they're looking at.
Sure.
And that was really helpful to get me in a lot of my portfolio stuff going forward, to get as many live videos and pictures and sound recordings of everything I'm doing, and not just have my code repertoire, because that's always been my, okay, you've got my GitHub, you can see everything, what else do you need?
Yeah.
So yeah, no, it was a great experience. And then also getting to see like that other schools have themed design programs was really cool.
Yeah.
Because that was
They're
like
growing, because when I started, there were none, and now they're popping up all over the place, which is great, because it's becoming recognized as a thing, as it were.
Yeah.
Discipline, and not just Mickey Mouse, as it were.
And I mentioned it to a couple of undergrads when I was doing my master's, and they were really, really thrilled to find out that was a thing, because Arizona State offers an arts, media, and engineering program, which is really focused on immersive experiences, but has no connections to themed entertainment. So there's a lot of kids graduating from the program going, cool, I know how to do all this. What do I do now?
Yeah. Exactly. Oh, I think that was Bob Ward, not Bob Weiss.
Was it?
Yeah, we haven't got Bob Weiss yet. But
Okay.
Bob Ward was on it, and he's fantastic.
I'm terrible at
Bob, if you're listening to it,
we'll
we
edit that.
apologize in advance. Bob Ward, co-founder of Universal Creative.
Yep, that one.
So, that one.
I'm so bad with faces.
If someone wanted to reach you, how would they do that?
Oh, LinkedIn or my Instagram, or do you want my card?
I'll take your card. But why don't you spell your name, just so
Yeah.
that you can, so that people can look you up, and of course we'll link that also in the YouTube comments as well.
Yeah, it's Stacia, Stacia Maconiates, Meconiates.
I'm glad you spelled that for us, because I certainly couldn't.
Oh, don't worry, no one can ever spell it.
Right. That's great. Well, I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Well, there you have it. That was Stacia. Just a person who was dealt a hand that not many would wish upon themselves. But despite this, Stacia is resilient, and through this adversity is taking steps to try to make the world a better place for others. Before you turn this podcast off, take a moment and reflect, and think about whether you've taken the time to give a chance to someone who you might otherwise overlook in the hiring process. If they're anything like Stacia, look a little deeper, and I think you'll see that they have a lot to offer. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation. For themedattraction.com, I'm Nate. Thanks for listening.